Welcome to our series, Community Conversations. I'm Erika Fernandez.
And I'm Alma and Erika. So, Erika, we should, I think, talk about what's going on with all the media attention that LA is getting. For example, the confiscation of all the pills that were packaged in children's candy boxes. And the most, I think, the sadder story is the one that happened with the overdose, the fatal overdose that happened in one of the schools for LA District.
Yeah, and just to clarify about fentanyl, for our community members who might not know what fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. So it's made in a lab that is in the streets right now. That it's being put into pressed pills and being sold on the streets.
Mm-hmm. So one of the terms right now that's out is the rainbow pills, right? And because of the colorful colors that they're using. But what we're getting, or the information that's been out, is that certain cartels, I guess, use different types of colors for their pills so that they know what batch is theirs and which one's not. But I know there's a lot of scares in the community about maybe, cartels targeting young kids so that they're enticing to them because they look like candy, like tarts. And so I think it's important that the community knows that it is very dangerous. It's a very dangerous drug, and it's a very potent drug. And so it's important that they know, yes, it's, dangerous, but it's not targeted to young kids. But at the same time, I think it's important that the community knows that people that are already using drugs and that are experimenting with these type of pills, the dangers associated with it. You know, the fentanyl that is being used in the street, fentanyl, is not the same than the fentanyl that we use in hospitals or with like end of life care.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that, for example, if we cut a pill into half and you take one half of that fentanyl pill and I take the other half, I might overdose because maybe the consistency on that pill, the fentanyl was more on the part that I took versus you.
And just to touch on overdose, since you started talking about that, a lot of people in the community, sometimes when we hear the word overdose, we automatically think, somebody died or it was like a fatal overdose. And, I always like to put it as, there's an overdose and then there's a fatal overdose. So where, an overdose can happen to anybody and you don't have to die from one, and it can happen with anything, like a lot of people, with coffee, we can overdose on coffee. Just having too much of something can be an overdose. I know a lot of people say that you can get an overdose on marijuana, and especially with our youth, when I go out there, oh yeah, you can overdose no, you can overdose on marijuana. But yeah, you can, because people start throwing up and they have to go to the hospital, and that's an overdose. Like it happens with pills, happens with coffee, with candy, with a lot of things. So I think that's the important part of knowing with these pills, because the fentanyl is 50 to 100 more times stronger. An overdose can be, very possible when they're taking these pills. And because they're all different pills, they are synthetically made. They're made by people in their homes and, in labs, man-made labs, so they don't know the amount of fentanyl that is in each pill.
With that, we get a lot of questions in the community. Like, for example, I've had questions like, is it true that someone can die just by touching, the pills? And experts say that, or they tell us that it's really that's not the way that you would have an overdose, because it has to go into your bloodstream, right?
And, when you are experiencing an overdose, is a slow process. Like, you're slowly starting starting to stop breathing very slowly. So that's why it's really important to recognize the signs of an overdose when it is happening. And, even though they say, just by touching the pill, you're not going to like collapse into an overdose and start like foaming up and throwing up and stuff, because it is a slow process. But not to say that depending on our weight and our age and our tolerance level, whenever there is, a place, if there is powder fentanyl, because, that's something that, maybe a 1-year-old can touch and it gets into their blood system somehow, an overdose can happen then. So I guess it just, we have to be careful. It can depend on our size, our tolerance, on the potence of the powder or the pill.
Mm-hmm. I like to share a story with families sometimes. I was hospitalized a few years ago, and I remember getting morphine. And I remember the feeling of me slowly, my breathing was slowed. And I remember just like, what's happening to me? Because I got scared because it was hard for me to breathe. So can you imagine a pill that's 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine? That's scary.
Yeah, and just knowing, being aware of fentanyl, I think is important for the community because it is such a dangerous and potent drug. We need to be aware for our children because, an overdose can happen to anybody. We ourselves can have medication, opioids that we can have prescribed. If our back hurts, they take away
our wisdom
teeth. Something we can have prescribed opioids at home, and they could be dangerous. We can forget that we took one, or we don't have them locked up, and the little kids can get to it. An overdose can happen to anybody.
Yes. And that's the importance of medication safety. And I sometimes tell families that sometimes we can become our own kid's dealer. Because we'll have the medication at home. It's not being supervised. We don't count the pills, and we don't put it in a lockbox. And so it's easily accessible. So it's really important if we're having a party and if we have medication in the medicine cabinet, that we pull that from the medicine cabinet. Because for some reason, when people, go into your restroom, they like to look into the medicine cabinet. I almost want to put a camera saying, hey, you're on camera, because it's really important that we as a community get to know what types of medications are dangerous for our kids. There's apps on our phones that or even just Google the number, that's on the pill, and it'll tell the child, the teenager, what that pill is going to do to them. And so with technology nowadays, kids are exposed to so many things. And so if they're learning about it, then we should learn about it, because we have to be 2 steps ahead of our children at all times.
Yeah. And just with that part of knowing what medication we're taking, a lot of the times the doctor will give us an opioid. You don't even know it's an opioid. Like, I know my grandma would always be like, my family's Mexican, so my grandma I'll be like, oh, I have a headache, and my grandma would be like, here, take this pill. Like, I had no idea what this pill was, and she would just be like, here, take it. My doctor gave me this, and like, who knows what it was? Could have been an opioid, I don't know. But
that's very common.
But that's like a very common theme, at least in my family, the medication sharing, and that's a thing that we shouldn't be doing, because what might be good for you, it's not good for our kids, especially our kids, and then that can start some type of addiction for them.
Yeah. And also, you don't know if that person has an allergy to a medication, and it's also against the law to share medication. And it's important also, I tell families, when they're out in the community and asking questions about pills and where do I take them. Most police stations will take the medication. They have the boxes, and so you just bring it in and safely dispose of it. But we just need to make sure that the community knows that it's illegal to share medication. I tell them every time you go to the doctor, you get a new prescription. So there's no need to save the medication. And so that's those are the little things that we can do at home, to help keep our kids safe from opioids. Maybe our community doesn't know what an opioid is. An opioid is a type of narcotic medication, like something like what Erica said, the medication you get when you get a tooth pulled or when you have a back injury or an ankle or whatever it is. It's your Norcos, Vicodin, codeine, things like that, of that sort.
Yeah, and so it's important to, talk to our kids about what's going on because these pills, if we either have them in our medicine cabinet or they're out in our community, it's important that we're teaching them, at the age appropriate, talking to them about that, to be having conversations with them, what have they heard and see if they're hearing, right? Because the kids hear a lot of different stuff out in the community, and to see if the information they're getting is what and or maybe they know other things that you don't know and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna look that up because I need to know what my kid is hearing out, and be checking on our families, having dinners together so we know what's going on. That's a way that we can protect our kids from in a way being targeted but not directly targeted, with fentanyl and things like that.
What I tell families is, okay, it may not be your child, but that child is going to go to school with your child. It's in the same environment as your child. So it's to our best advantage if we see that the neighbor's child is unattended because parents need to work. Invite them over to your house. Hey, do you want to come do homework with my kids? Have you had a snack? Let me give you a snack. Because that way that that child is growing up in a safe environment, the same as yours, and they're going to be together in school. And so it's to our best advantage that all kids are well taken care of. And then stop that, well, it's not my kid or it's not in my house, so it doesn't matter, because it really does matter. So the sense of community, nowadays, like you were mentioning, family meals together are really important because that's the only way you get to see your child on a daily basis, how he looks, he or she, how they're talking, what they're sharing, and they know that they're important to you because you're asking them, how was your day at school? What happened? And so things like that I think are important versus everybody being in their own room and they're just texting, hey mom, bring me a snack. Yeah. That's kind of what I see happening nowadays with families.
And I think sometimes we don't want to be like, oh, I'm not going to be the chismosa from the neighborhood or something. But, it takes back to the same thing. Sometimes, families, because of the stigma, is like, even though they kind of know something's going on with their kids, they don't reach out to try to get help or try to find out, like, why did my kid have like an empty prescription thing or little baggies, or random pills? And they try to like brush it off the more that they can because of that stigma. And I think that's why it's really great if we can, as a community, if we have those relationships, then it's easier to be like, hey, comadre, I heard, I found this in my kids. Do you know anything about this? And just being able to share that, with the people that live around us, like without judgment, because, out in the community, sometimes we get a lot of families that are like, oh my God, you guys, where can I find this for my child? He's, been using pills. I don't know what to do with him now. And sadly, sometimes it's at a later stage where it's like, well, he needs to want treatment because, we can't force him into try to stop, taking these pills and doing this stuff. So it's always so important to, be educated, be aware, and prevention, being able to forget about the stigma and, whatever everybody else thinks. I'm going to care for my loved ones or my child.
It's better to have the information and not need it than to need it and not have it. You never know. It could be, maybe it's not you or your kids, but it could be your neighbors. It could be your sister's children, but unfortunately nowadays, I think we all know someone, that uses some type of substance. So it's important that we have that information.
And another thing, talking about having information, with opioids, there is Narcan or naloxone that is a medication that can help in case of an overdose. So it can stop an overdose if when it's happening. Basically, it's kind of like a medication that goes into your receptors in the brain, and it will basically like cover it and take away like the opioid medication on it for a short period of time while we get help and call 911 or something like that.
Yes. So there is help and there is a way to reverse an overdose with opioids, but we don't want to get to that point, right? So that's why the prevention part is really important. Prevention takes a lot of effort, but in the long run, it really does prevent our kids from, experimenting with substances versus just letting it go. Like you say, they find the little baggies, or they see Visine in their room, or they see things that are signs that they may be using, and then you just leave it alone. You don't want to talk about it because you think that if you ignore it, it's going to go away, but it really doesn't. And then once the problem is already there and they try to reach out for help, yes, we want help for our kids, but does the teenager want the help? Because unfortunately, it is voluntary. And if they don't want treatment, we cannot force anybody into treatment.
Yeah. Parents ask, like, or when we do presentations, so what do we do? Like, what do we do for our kids? How can we prevent them from using? And really, I have a 12-year-old, and what I tell them is that, in my house, I'm a chismosa, I'm entrometida, which means like, you're nosy, you get into everybody's business, and, you do all of this, but, my son is going to middle school, and there's so many things that they're getting, learning barely because, they don't necessarily have to have it at the household, but they're learning new things that other kids bring from their household. And, so just asking those questions and trying to have, I know when they're teenagers, they're like, oh, I hate you, mom. I wish you wouldn't bug me. But just having that little conversation, he'll still come and ask me certain things that he doesn't know. For example, like I'm always asking him how his day went or things like, and like last time he was like, oh, mom, can I have $5? And I'm like, for what? Like I always ask him, for what? I'm not gonna give you $5. What are you gonna do with that? And he's like, oh, it's because my friend is like selling some drinks. And I'm like, what drinks? And then he's like, oh, it's like a drink that gamers drink. And I'm like, okay, what is it called? And then he shows it to me, and it's like an energy drink. And I'm like, you can't drink that? Like, you're 12. That's like, you're going to get an overdose on coffee or caffeine. And he's like, no, but other gamers drink it. Yeah, so they stay up all night playing. Like, it's not healthy for you. You cannot buy that. That's not something kids drink. It's bad for you. It's unhealthy. But I thought about it, and I'm like, right now it's that. Some kids are selling, energy drinks in his middle school. But, next thing, it could be pills, or it could be edibles, or it could be something else. And just, it was good that he was able to answer my questions and tell me, hey, can I have money? I want to buy this. And then I just, I tell him, I know everything. That's not good for you. You can't have that. But I'm just like thinking about it. Oh my God, it starts with like an energy drink. And then next thing, they're going to ask for money for something else. But just asking the questions, knowing, asking, for further clarification, I think that helps because we need to be, and our kids, know what they're doing.
So always remember that it's better to have the information and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Thank you, Alma. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for our series, Community Conversations, and hope you join next time.